Good evening, Sandy Herrick.
Good evening, Dana King Francesco.
How are you?
Oh, I am so happy to be here tonight. I really am. I'm good. There's a lot going on. I'm ready. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's been a hectic day here as well, and I'm ready for a nice, relaxing show, or at least a show with some good conversation, huh?
Good. That is a guarantee.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to begin first and foremost by thanking everyone for joining us tonight or tomorrow or in the coming days, wherever you happen to be around Grandmother Earth. Sandy and I love the fact that for the past 11, almost 12 years, we have been, out on the airwaves with all of you every week, every month for a great, good long time, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Tonight we're going to be talking about having the courage to be with life as it is rather than the way we want it to be. And that was a topic that Sandy and I discussed last night in a phone call. Sandy, would you talk for a moment about why it is that you chose that subject?
Well, being a therapist, being a psychic, being a human being, and being a part of this wave of see what you want, be the best you can, vision boards, if you don't like it, change it. I mean, the whole modality of self-help and whatnot is a very powerful tool and device to constantly say, or in some way say, what I want is out in my future, or I'm not satisfied with where I am, or I wish something could change. And therapy is, my cat wants something to change too, like be fed. So that's being in the moment. And that's all good. That's all good. But I'm also watching right now massive depression, suicide, alcohol, drugs, disassociation. And so there's that place of, okay, what is it we're missing? What is it we're not talking about? And that is, what is our reality? What's in the moment that we're not facing or not wanting to look at, so that we do need drugs, or we do need to disassociate, or we always say, I just want it, I want it over, I want it different. So tonight is about, what is it that we're resisting to feel? What is it? And you know this because people have said it to you 1,000 times too. If I feel my sadness, I won't be able to stop. If I cry, I won't be able to stop. If I won't be able to. Mm-hmm. So we're always missing out on the moment of what our reality is, or fearing to touch it. What do you want to say about that?
Well, I think that's a perfect way to describe it. And you're right that in the movement that was called New Age, which you and I both chuckle as one of our favorite phrases, right?
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. The thought of, if you don't like it, change it. Alter your reality. But what has been missing from that is, what was wrong with reality as it was, and was there something within that reality that needed to be faced, needed to be healed, needed to be tossed away, walked away from, boundary building? What was there that you're wanting to anesthetize yourself to by jumping to what's the next and best in the New Age, let's all feel good movement? How does that sound, Sand? Because that's how I feel about it.
Absolutely. And the New Age, God bless its days. It's a part of my toolbox. I was there before the New Age, and I was there for the New Age. And I'm in now the progression from the New Age into accountability, into, who are we really, rather than just who do we want to be and who don't we like being. And so there's that beauty here, and I'm saying it now because it is time to see, who are we really, and why are we really What's made us this, so that we can get a touchstone inside us rather than constantly flounder. And I'm going to say this to millennials, there's that place of so much was given to them to eliminate them from having to worry or fret or to have ambition or to understand competition or to even know that you have to work to achieve.
Uh-huh.
How can you feel who you are rather than be rescued from having to experience any discomfort?
Beautifully said.
I
So
mean,
let's begin there with this idea that we need to rescue our children. We're talking about millennials at the moment. We need to rescue our children from feeling discomfort, the pain of getting dirty and working hard. Where do you feel that wanting to rescue others from the pain of, living a real life comes from, Sandy?
Well, I want to be honest and say that it has to be some kind of progression.
Uh-huh.
That it's a movement as solid as the New Age. It's a movement as solid as, pre-war children that all had to go to work, and labor camps that were for children, that if you were working at 10, it was because you needed that nickel to bring home. It's the next phase of identity where whoever the adults are decided that something was going to be so advanced and that their children be so elite that they wouldn't have to struggle. And we're seeing the blowout from that now. We're seeing you can't be entitled and just be bought an education. You still have to go and earn your education. There's that place of, my father was one of those people, or my grandfather, I have to say my grandfather, was, I want it better for my children than it was for me.
Uh-huh.
Or, my father was, I walked 5 miles in the snow barefoot to get to school and then some,
Mm-hmm.
And, but I'm also a child that if you missed the school bus, you walked to school.
Right.
Because we didn't have 2 cars, and it was a hoof and then some. And you didn't go home and say, I missed the bus, so I'm staying home. It was, if you missed the bus, you just kept on walking.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go home to have a discussion. You kept walking until you got to school and got your detention.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a different mindset of what is my obligation, or what is my duty, or I guess, what's the ethics of character that says it's my responsibility to show up? It's my responsibility to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that right now is exactly where we need to come back to, especially because of what's happening in politics, what's happening in the Me Too movement, what's happening in all of the different phases of these cultures that are starting to speak up and say, I'm here, and this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's traumatizing us to really see how many different mindsets there are, even in our home.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to see we all come from a different point of view.
Right.
It's
Right.
not necessarily my house, my rules. It's our home. What do we abide by? And yeah, if a kid's out of line, there are rules. So somewhere consequences got eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean I want everybody to have hardship or anything else. It's just, what's the consequence if we don't pay attention to what's happening right now? Then we're living in the fantasy of the future or the regret of the past,
Mm-hmm.
and not able to grasp the present. That even gives us a sense of identity to say, if I know where I am, then I can take a look at the direction I would like to go. But I need to know where I am, not just where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know I want to get places, but where am I so I can at least start from there?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, it really does. And as I'm listening to you and I'm bringing the information in, whether we're talking about millennials that have never known a consequence of having to work or a consequence of bad behavior, a lot of it, of course, has to do with parenting and generational things, etc. But it really does come down to societal norms and who we've become, sometimes based on actually an imaginary world. So if we're not living a real world, maybe it's because we spend so time in unreal worlds like social media.
Exactly.
Where expectations of life and the way life should be, absolutely. If you go on Facebook and if you know somebody and you follow their thread, you know which people are keeping it real and which people are just putting the bows on the packages online, right?
Right.
And having said that, I feel as though there is such a consciousness when it comes to cyber reality and cyberspace and all of those social media types of things that it's easy to be caught up in escapism, whether it's escapism that you find via New Age, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of the above, or just burying your head in the sand.
Right.
There have been ways now presented for us to not look at reality, but to present a life or what we feel our life should be or we want it to be. And there are consequences of not really taking a look in the mirror.
There's the incredible, and I want everybody out there, a millennial, if you're listening, please don't feel you're being judged.
Oh, no, not at all. It's not all millennials.
I want you to be embraced with, we're acknowledging the trauma that you're experiencing and even honoring the fact that you're traumatized from having the experience.
Right.
And, so how do you deal with it? How does anybody deal with the culture of their time? My time was downtown 1965, 66, 67. And so the ethics were completely different, and we were assumed to be the most, disrespectful, arrogant, non-American loving, burn your bra, burn the flag. How dare we? What has the world come to? So, and talk about being real. There's how do you defend someone going to war or someone choosing not to go to war, and there's integrity for both sides.
Right.
That was my generation. And if a woman doesn't wear a bra, is she a whore? No, she's a woman not wearing a bra. And that's what I'm saying about staying in the moment.
Right.
So that the projection, the story, doesn't amplify into something that is not real. Right. And I think it's even important to find out what is real. How do we interpret reality?
Right. Well, and I believe that, and again, it's not just millennials, but sadly, and for whatever reason, they do get the moniker of being that generation. When we're not allowed to face harshness, when we're not allowed to express emotion, anger, frustration, sadness, grief, whatever it happens to be, as parents, when we don't allow that or we forbid it, I mean, in my household, we weren't allowed to cry. And ironically, there was a punishment if I cried. Right.
That's astounding.
Right. And so what I'm saying about all of this is living the life that you're living requires that you live life, and you live life with all that life brings as a young person, as a young adult, as an older adult. And sometimes, depending on the parentage or the way the parents were parented, there are certain things that we're not allowed to be real with growing up. And so as we get older and we become adults, the reality of showing emotion, whether it's anger or frustration or sadness or the hardship of going to school, keeping good grades and having a job and paying for college, in some ways we become stunted. And oftentimes when we notice or we feel that there's something stunted within us, I believe that's oftentimes when we try to find a way to cope or a way to anesthetize, because we were not taught how to cope. And we're then not keeping it real because, by golly, we were never taught to be real.
And therefore, there's the beauty of having a feeling and having the feeling be an honest feeling. And also being able to navigate feelings so that someone who's having a feeling doesn't have to be overwhelmed by the fact that they're having it, shamed for the fact that they're having it, or blamed for having a feeling. There was just a little blurb on TV the other day about the 25-year reunion of Friends. And one of the writers or producers sat there on set, and I think I saw it on YouTube, and said, we couldn't make that show today because 25 years ago, people sat on the sofa, drank coffee, and talked.
Right.
And today you come in, and if somebody's got a cup of coffee, they're normally isolated, or even if they're with somebody, they're both isolating right in front of each other on their phones. So they're not talking to each other. They're talking through and to something outside. Mm-hmm. And again, no shame, no blame. The observation of this is what's happening now. I'm involved with my phone. I'm involved with my, I'm proud that I can do it, and I'm horrified at how much I don't know what to do with it. Where's Lily? I don't know what to do with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Right.
And so there is a culture that is being detached from the consequences or the responsibility, and I believe it's called ghosting, where there's absolutely, you don't have to face anybody to engage with the reality of I'm with you or I'm not with you. Mm-hmm. You just disappear.
Right.
And I have had clients in complete trauma because they've been ghosted through a text. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like to call somebody and they don't answer the phone, or to write somebody and they don't send a letter. So that would have been ghosting back, 40, 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. But still, there was some kind of interaction eye to eye that you were actually grieving the physicality of someone, not the mechanical representation of someone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so my heart breaks because how do we know what's real if even when we're reading something, we're left to our own... Bobby's so good at this. He goes, well, the way you read it is the way you read. Oh, how do you know if they wrote it that way? You all know how we do. You read a note and they said goodbye. And it was like, well, is that my goodbye or they said goodbye?
Right. Is that with a Southern accent or is that with your New York, Connecticut accent?
My New York accent would be bye, bitch. And my Southern was bye, honey child. They both could be very sincere and loving, or like, up yours and I'll never see you again.
Right. So there are a lot of things about perception and keeping it real. And these days it is much easier in the day of smartphones and tablets to, rather than face and have a good conversation with somebody, whether it's agreeable and loving or maybe it's a bit contentious. I mean, you and I have had some pretty good conversations on both ends of that spectrum. And
absolutely.
And here we are 12 years later, right? Because of the communication. And so I think that over time, don't you feel if communication is no longer direct, either on the phone where, either somebody calls you back, rings you back up, or you visit with them, you sit down with them, the ability to escape, or the term you're using, ghost, has become so easy that it's become part of a very easy consciousness to say, well, I'm just not going to return that text. I'm not going to return that call. And they'll know what I mean by that. Because if I just don't...
I'm sorry. Or I don't have to and I don't care.
Right. Exactly. Right. And in that, there's an avoidance.
Yes.
There's an avoidance. And we all know that our own wily mind and brain, we begin to create scenarios. And rather than have a voice-to-voice conversation or eyeball-to-eyeball conversation, what is it about keeping it real or having real conversations, being okay to say, you know, this is who I am. This is how I live my life. Where do you think that all of a sudden, Sandy, it became wrong to say this is who I am? Or I don't want to say wrong. Where did we feel all of a sudden so insecure? And
see, that's a whole other conversation. Being made wrong and being insecure are really different dilemmas.
Right. Right.
Because I know that I've known who I am and I've been made wrong because I've known it, and people didn't like it, and I'm not willing to back down from who I am.
Really? I hadn't noticed. I never noticed.
Well, see? Okay, thank you. I gotcha. And it's that place of, if I'm defiant, you'll hear it in my tone. If I write something, whenever we write something and someone reads it, it is left to the interpretation of the reader. Even when I say something or you say something and we hear it, we are triggered through so many filters. Please, everybody, listen to the genuine sensation of being human. Even when we hear the dialogue from someone that we are in need to hear the words so that I can comprehend why I'm either nervous or now distrusting or confused or reassured. The voice can reassure something because you feel a tone, and all of a sudden that tone hits a quiver inside of our nervous system that is a part of our natural, innate, given DNA to experience sound or vibration. Even a deaf person experiences vibration. And there is that place where if you read it, one of the most beautiful things about reading novels and wonderful books is that you create your own idea of it. You have your own images of it. When it's interpreted in a movie, you see, but you're still interpreting something. When you're with somebody, you're still interpreting it. But when it becomes real is when you are willing to stand up for who you are and not fear the reaction of another person to you. And we all fear it because there's only one thing that we all really want, and that is to belong. In some way, some form. We want to belong. Bingo. Or be chosen.
Yep.
And so the risk of being real is, what if I say what's really the truth and I'm rejected?
Yes.
I can remember feeling that as a child, saying the truth, being hit for telling the truth, and being completely confused with, but I'm telling you the truth, why am I being punished? And it took time to understand in that moment, telling the truth wasn't always what somebody wanted to hear. That's part of what's real, or are you real when only somebody accepts you?
Right.
We have to know something about ourselves that is not in that place of the trepidation of, I am lost if I'm not told by someone I exist. I'm lost if I'm not cared for somebody, and so I'm going to become something different so that they like me for who they want, rather than me be rejected for who I am. It boils down into that fraction of self-awareness, and we all want to survive. We all want to survive.
Yeah.
And so real is, are you okay with you? Do you know yourself enough to know that with or without someone's approval, you can still exist?
Yes. That's exactly where I wanted to go tonight in the conversation. With or without someone's approval, with or without someone's love, with or without somebody's blessing, can you be you?
Exactly. And I mean that across the spectrum.
Yes.
From the devil in the deep blue sea to God on high, goddess, this, that, I know as a Catholic, if I didn't do what God wanted me to do, I feared not being loved and accepted way down the road when I die. I was being manipulated as a child for the fear of, would I be rejected? Rather than seen as something that was blessed and welcomed and allowed the encouragement to explore reality.
Yes.
And be trusted for having good judgment, or taught if I was faltering.
Right. And sometimes as young people, whether it's growing up in a particular religious path, or Cindy Wallier is in the chat room tonight.
Hello, honey bun.
Along with Lady Hawk and Lily. They're all in the chat room tonight.
Gutsy Woodsy.
Yeah.
Bitch, where are you? You all know who you are.
And Corey is sitting in the chair behind me here in the office. And
hi, Corey.
Yeah.
Hi, Sandy.
Getting to know you.
Yes.
And, keeping it real. So even sometimes when we're young, Cindy and I are both adopted people.
Yes.
So straight away, we're taught that it's okay to be who we're not. And in fact, it's encouraged in order to fit in.
The barter is almost unfathomable.
The barter is unfathomable. And so it presents to us sometimes very early in our lives this idea that we need to be somebody, even when we know as little kids we're not that.
Right.
But in order to be loved or to be safe or to be fed or to be accepted or to make the basketball team or whatever it happens to be, to get into the right school, we're taught to perhaps not be anything of who we really are at the core. For many years, I gave lectures at Grand Valley State University, and I gave them to the medical students. And one of the very first questions, Sandy, that I would ask these graduate students is, how many of you are here in this classroom, in this curriculum, to be physicians because it's what you want to be?
Right.
Some of them would raise their hand, and I would say to the others, and why are you here? Well, it's our family tradition. We're all doctors.
Right.
Well, if you weren't going to live up to your family tradition, what would you be? And I'll never forget, a few years back, maybe 3 years back, a young man looked at me and he said, with tears in his eyes, I really want to be a high school history teacher.
Wow.
I really want to be a high school history teacher. And so this conversation is relevant in many ways, but Sandy, there is a price that each and every one of us pays when we are not authentic to who we are. And some people will live an entire lifetime but what I'm saying is, to people who understand that something is not right, something within me is different than what I'm projecting or what is expected. And how do I get to be real? It's like the Velveteen Rabbit, right? How do I get to be real?
Well, first of all, to know that real is a state of mind. It's a state of physicality. It's a state of emotional intelligence, and it's a state of courage. It takes courage to be real.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to narrow it down to the finiteness right now of people asking me, how are you? How are you? How are you? Oh my God, Sandy, my husband has been diagnosed with terminal leukemia cancer. And so part of, if not the majority of, what is real is that my husband has been given a notice that his life is on notice. What is real is the second we're conceived, we're all given the same notice.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't realize it.
Right.
And keeping it real for me right now means I could either fantasize the demise of my husband and fret. I could demise the demise by wondering what's going to happen to me because he will not be here at some point, and fret or worry or disassociate. And my choice, and it is a choice, and I was very clear when I felt the choice come into me, that if I missed out on the reality of where Bobby is at every second, I'm going to miss out on the love that he has for me and the love I have for him, because I will not be with us. I'll be someplace where I wish he wasn't sick. I'm scared of him getting sick. What is it going to be like? And I'm using this as an example because it is rather dramatic, and people come to me with the drama of, where am I in my own drama? Taking the drama out of it means I'm with Bobby, and there's no guarantee I'm going to be alive tomorrow, and he outlives me. That's real.
Yep.
I am very aware that there is a spectrum of reality catching all of us. With, I could be in the fantasy of my fear of being without him, or what I'm going to have to be with him during this. And again, no judgment, no blame for anybody that does it differently.
Right.
I'm tracking my own reality with, I refuse to fear loving Bobby as he and I are in the simple realities of life. There's no guarantee. There's a ticket all the way to the end that says we get a free ride. There's no guarantee for any of us, because we've been in the New Age, or we pray, or we believe in a certain belief, that we're going to be rescued or freed from the hardships of any kind of difficulty that would just be life, not burden, life. That is a burden to carry, no matter what. But in that, our humanity, our humanness, is graced with an experience that says, here you are, you're in this moment, who are you? And there's nothing more profound than life and death to bring you to that seat of reality.
Yes.
That says, game's up. Game's up. Who am I in this?
Mm-hmm.
Where's my love? What do I want to do? What don't I want to do? And there are individuals who would say, I can't do this. I need to leave. Mm-hmm. Then be real about it. Or, I don't know how to do this. How do I find help? Don't be shamed. Be real about it. Or, I don't know how to say I'm scared, so I'm going to pretend I'm okay. Be real about it. And what I'm saying to everybody is that there's permission for reality to step into and be the forefront so you don't have to pretend about what you're feeling or you're uncomfortable with or what you learn to be comfortable with. There are some people who want me to be more upset than I am.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that fascinating?
Mm-hmm.
That people take me in their arms, oh, Sandy, and it's like, I'm okay. It's like they look at me like, what? And I realize they need more attention from me than they actually want to be with me.
Uh-huh.
And the attention that is like, so being real means being brave enough not to take care of the other person that's asking you, even on a subliminal level
Mm-hmm.
or passive aggressive level. Could you soothe me because I'm scared about something and I want you to take care of me, even though it looks like I'm taking care of you?
Ooh.
Yeah, baby.
It's amazing how that passive aggressive stuff even slips into those times. Hey, San.
Yeah. And so being real means I'm not going to want to hurt your feelings, but your feelings may be hurt.
Uh-huh.
Because in my reality, I'm not going to abandon something. I'm not going to be cruel. But I'm also not going to be fake. And we have to train or practice. And I think you and I are exquisite examples of practicing being real with each other so we don't have to pretend and think that that's real. Especially being adopted.
Mm-hmm.
To know that there's all sorts of things that can happen, but the love will not be taken away.
Right.
It doesn't matter. The love won't be taken away.
Right.
And that takes courage.
Mm-hmm.
And if the love isn't there, to be able to see it and be brave enough to grieve it or honor it's not here, don't chase it.
Right. Right.
Don't beg it.
You've got a note here from Lady Hawkins. She's saying, that's the reality of being real, though, Sandy. I thank you for that. She's giving you a thank you for teaching her how to be real. Yeah.
Thank you, Lady Hawk. Because too many times in my life, it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do to get that love back when they're running down the road? How do I chase it so that I can convince them to love me? And I would tear myself into shreds
Mm-hmm.
to wait for somebody to turn around. The reality was, Sandy, what are you doing? Why are you chasing something that doesn't even want you?
Mm-hmm.
How do I bear the pain of not being wanted?
Right.
I mean, that's a huge reality.
That's a huge reality, whether it's being wanted by friends, family, lovers, whatever it happens to be. What do we do when that, comes upon us? Do we escape? Do we escape it or do we face it? And there are a lot of things that happen when we face it within ourselves.
Right. And part of our not being real is in that fantasy of my mind can understand something, but my nervous system can't.
Uh-huh.
Or my nervous system can understand, but my mind can't. I can't wrap my mind around it.
Mm-hmm.
So being real is to honor there's a split.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of find a place to soothe yourself because you already know you're panicking. How do we soothe ourselves in the reality of, oh my God, I just got rejected.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do to protect myself rather than exploit myself and defile myself? Because I don't know how to be safe
Mm-hmm.
by being me.
Right. Right.
People are committing suicide because they're rejected from Facebook.
Yes, they are. And you and I have both talked about there are many forms of suicide, and some are more socially acceptable. And some people are taking that route rather than to face their reality. And I was just asking Cindy here in the chat room if she ever imagined when she was a little girl what her birth family was like. And she said, I had deep fantasies that were actually somewhat accurate.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, she knows who her birth family is now. I know mine. I remember as a young girl thinking, I always wondered what they look like. I always wondered, well, what did they look like, and were they nice people? But I never really had any deep fantasies about it. But I did wonder what were their faces like. And people have asked me, well, the reality is, well, you know, you took a look at that photo of my mother and said, holy smokes, there are your eyeballs.
Exactly.
And you took a look at my dad and said, did he give birth to you?
Exactly. So, God bless the new way of finding your DNA.
Yeah, the first person to reach out is sitting here in the room with me. So talk about reality.
Exactly.
The reality
Catching
is,
up.
a year ago, I would not have had any delusion or illusion that I would ever meet the people that I wondered what they look like. And about a year ago, I received a message from my cousin Corey, who's sitting behind me, saying, hey, we're cousins. And I had to sit with that for a minute, and I went in and I got Todd and I said, oh my goodness, because I knew my reality was about to change. And whatever I wondered as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, now the rubber was going to meet the road because I was going to find out. And I had to kind of steel myself for what the reality might be.
So let me ask you and Corey a question. Corey, what motivated you to reach out?
I didn't hear that.
What motivated you to reach out to me, Corey?
If I may, without being invasive, I totally respect this, and if you don't want to come on air, please, let me allow that space to be respected. But I am wondering, what motivated you to reach out?
I felt a void in my life that I wanted to find my cousins that I knew existed, but I had lost touch with them for so many years, and finally knew that by ancestry DNA that there was a possibility that I might be able to find them that way.
How did that void express itself inside you in the reality of its existence?
Wow. That's a hard question.
I think she has to think about that one for a minute, Sand.
Please do, because it's visceral. It's visceral. You said there was a void. You're talking about something so physically real that if you talk to somebody else, they may not validate it for you as real. So I'm asking, so that other people, when they feel that void, how did you experience yours to know that it was real?
It was just a really strong yearning. It's really hard to put into words.
But I feel it when you say it because tears are coming to me.
Yeah, it was a really, really strong yearning.
And the reality of that, in my tears coming, is that if you have no one to express that to, is it real? When you express it, and if someone invalidates it, is it real?
It's very real.
Exactly.
It's very real for me.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. How were you able to claim it without having it dismissed or having it float away?
By acting on it.
Bravo.
She's a tough Aries chick from Jersey.
Well, honey, you're close enough to New York to talk about.
Oh, she's a
whatever I wanna
Pisces.
talk about.
Tough Pisces.
She's a tough Pisces. So she's gonna fish around until literally upstream and downstream until she finds what she needs. Yeah.
So let me ask one more question, if I may.
Sure.
When you knew the truth was found, what happened to the void?
To the void?
Yes.
Oh. It was like...
Now you're bringing the tears on this side.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best. The best. It's the best.
And that's what we're talking about. To be in the present, to have to have the reality validated, it means you're not crazy. It means you're not imaginary in your experiencing of yourself, and that something is so honest in us. It's more powerful than anything that's outside of us saying, why are you even thinking about that? Or you're making it up. Or, oh, stop exaggerating. Or, God bless Bobby. He's actually accused me of embellishing. And I said, excuse me?
Oh, my.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you were going to say anything to our audience tonight about the void, what could you tell them to have the courage to honor about it?
Ooh, that's a good question.
To honor about it?
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness. That is a good question. That's a really deep question.
Thank you. Welcome to the show.
I think she needs to think about that one for a moment as well. Everybody in the chat room is feeling what Corey was feeling.
What's that?
That they were able to feel her yearning and the love in the yearning, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying, is that even though we may not be able to articulate, the experience of the reality is emotionally expressive, and we commune in it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's an emotional awareness that you don't have to articulate. It's expressed, and finally we're validated.
Yes.
Our feelings are validated.
Yes.
And we're real.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so real. It's so real.
Corey's expressing that, it's just so real. The yearning was real, and the fulfillment of what she was yearning for is so real. And it took courage for her to reach out. Frankly, it took courage.
Yeah. Yes.
And the yearning outweighed whatever fear, I'm assuming. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
She's agreeing with the statement that sometimes, and I think it's true for all of us, that our yearning or our desire outweighs the fear. And sometimes we are brought to we find ourselves on our knees moments, right? And all of a sudden it's damn the torpedoes. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what the fear in the back of my mind is rattling on about. The desire and the yearning is more than that now.
And the other side of the coin of that, and I say this tenderly to anyone in the quiver, where you are so in fear of finding out the truth that you don't go to the truth to talk to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's as potent as I feel it, but what if it's not there? It does take courage to go face the reality of yes or no, valid or not. And what's amazing for me is to be able to have the stamina, because it does take stamina, to stand in a reality that gets rejected because you know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you know the truth doesn't mean you're free. Because that's exactly when everybody goes, wait a second, what are you doing? So there's that beauty of you have to know your agenda. And I'm going to ask this question of both of you. The agenda was from your hearts, and I know it.
Yes.
And that makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Oh, without a doubt.
Corey said without a doubt.
And that brings the tears, because it was your heart that could not lie about what the love was that you were seeking, that you knew that was out there waiting for you, that didn't even know, but you knew.
Exactly. Yes.
And I know he understood exactly what I said.
We did. And that love comes in so many forms, doesn't it, Sandy?
Yes.
It comes in so many forms for so many people. There's a love, there's a desire to be filled. And we don't always know what it is. By golly, we know it's there. We know for us it's real to feel it. And sometimes in our quest to become real, we have to leave others out. And those others are the ones that would put up the roadblocks, or the what about me? What about me? If you go seeking what you're yearning for there, what does that mean about me? And so sometimes we have to go that path alone with only our desire and our yearning, wouldn't you say?
Right. Yes. I'm going to say this from that place, and I want a reaction, whatever it is that both of you would like to say, or anybody in the chat room. Unfortunately, we have conditioned ourselves to endure way too much pain.
Yes.
And we have conditioned ourselves to endure way too much rejection, to the point that we fear being accepted. What happens if we're accepted?
Then what?
Exactly. Who am I if I'm really accepted?
Mm-hmm.
Then I have to kind of show up. Can I be real if I'm accepted and not pretend or fantasize?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a deep conversation in that place of, do I trust myself, or do I just agonize over the fact that I don't know who I am, so I fantasize about what I can be?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a critical thing right now in our society, because there is so much fantasy out there to project on or to follow. Or, if you don't have 50 million followers, who are you?
Right.
If somebody that you want doesn't like you on Facebook, does that mean the 400 people that did like you don't count? Unfortunately, it does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have been accused of being too much. I know this may be hard for you to believe.
I'm trying to digest that right now.
And I'm kind of like, but I'm not even everything that I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm being accused of something that I am innately. And how do I mature what I am so I'm secure in it rather than chaotic in it?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes wisdom. That takes growing up. That takes trial and error. That takes risking living life. And I think what we are right now at the crisis of is that not everybody's willing to risk living life.
Mm-hmm.
Living life is hard work.
It's very hard work. For some people, having a cyber life is much more amenable now. And there are so many ways of living a cyber life. whether, it's groups. There are so many groups you can be involved in on the internet, or just drowning in the, rather than to have one-on-one relationship with self or relationship with others, whether it's four-legged or the two-legged or the winged kind. Because, Sandy, sometimes when we get real or we have real relationships, we then have, and here's the big word, a responsibility.
Absolutely.
To show up for those relationships, the real relationships. Yeah. You and I met via cyber world.
Absolutely. But we saw something in each other that was a curiosity, and gratefully you reached out and said, you're the real deal, girl. Who are you? And I said, well, I'm thinking the same thing about you.
Yeah.
And to pursue it was the courage.
Right.
To endure it is the courage. To navigate the distance, the personalities, the differences, the similarities, is the reality of navigating a relationship rather than just wanting it to be perfect from the instant it happens.
Yes.
That is not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where's my soulmate? Well, even if you have one, it's going to take work.
Right.
I want my twin flame. Okay. You're talking about fire.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Uh-huh.
And so it's what does it take to even have a conversation? Do you know how scary it is to have a conversation?
For some people, it's very scary, and so it's very, I call it the Tupperware conversations. We talk about the new lids and the new colors of Tupperware in those very surfacey, and I love Tupperware, don't get me wrong.
I know you got some of the best. I'm very impressed.
I do. I have that big yellow bowl that people pay a lot of money for now. But what I'm saying is that for some people, keeping everything very surface is safe. It's not juicy. I like juicy.
I do too, but not everybody, and I'm going to say this, and whoever's out there listening, not everybody is a part of my intimate world.
Well, that's true.
And therefore there is discernment.
Yes.
And in the internet there is an assumption that everybody's a part of the intimate world. Mm-hmm. And so the boundaries are confused. And just because we are also intimately exposed, we think that, well, I should be able to ask this question, or I should be able to say this thing, or I should be loved because I'm following you. And the rejection in reality is mind-boggling because we haven't earned, in all due respect, the trust of navigating a relationship. My dog just snapped and just said yes.
Aww.
Relationships are earned. They're not rewarded.
That is very true.
I can't even tell you how many times people sat right in front of me or, cyberspace. I deserve this. It's like, really? We still have to earn whatever it is we think we deserve. One of the great horrors of the generation that my nephew was a part of was, I'll never forget it, when my brother told me, he plays soccer and there's no loss. Everybody wins. At the end of the game, it doesn't matter who wins. We all go out there, good game. There's no winner. Well, that meant if you sat on the bench, or if you didn't go out and kick, or if you didn't compete, or if you didn't own your responsibility, you were given the high five for you won. It doesn't matter. So there's no real friction in competition, or that you've earned something because you earned it rather than you were given it because you sat there and somebody decided you were just going to be given it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean the person who's waiting for, but I'm supposed to just receive this. They're not the ones at fault. The ones that decided they were going to free their child from having to feel the stress of competition is at fault.
Mm-hmm.
For not having reality be experienced with, if you're going to be out there, you need to be present. This isn't just given to you. Mm-hmm. And then be confused now with, it's mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. And again, no right, no wrong. It's the syndrome of whatever generation is going through its expression on how to create what they feel is parenting to provide their children with a better way of living. That's really the truth of this. Everybody wants to be the generation. I can honestly say, as a person from the 60s, I'm insulted with the fact that we didn't get it better than we thought we were out there championing to be better because we were going to make it better. Mm-hmm. We didn't solve shit. Excuse me. But we didn't. Uh-huh. But we expressed it. We spread it. We stirred it up. we talked a lot. And we made our contribution. Mm-hmm. That really irritated our parents and our ancestors. It was our voice. It was our time. This is the time. This is the voice. But I'm still saying, and I'm begging, if we aren't real, if we aren't in the moment, then we're in the fantasy of even ourselves. And that to me is sad and scary. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because what then gets to be expressed as the truth, and we all have it in us, just like Corey, it's in there. Mm-hmm. And it's louder than we can even imagine, and trust that space in our gut. Mm-hmm. Don't fear what you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Fear what you're not feeling. Be concerned.
Be concerned. Arrested development comes in many shades and many colors.
Exactly.
And sometimes we can wonder why our children are mentally and emotionally arrested.
Right.
And now what do? They're 30 years old.
Right.
And they don't know how to handle something. They're mentally and emotionally arrested. Arrested development.
Right. And that is it's almost an epidemic right now.
Yeah.
And it needs to be honored and respected,
yeah,
and held accountable to how do they then be brought to the reality of your parents can't solve all the issues, mm-hmm, or if you go to work, your employer doesn't. I'm so happy you're working for me. Oh my God, isn't that wonderful? I don't think anybody ever said that to me. It was like, I don't care if you want coffee. You're not going to no.
Right. And so, and in keeping it real then, at some point things do get real. And how do we help those that have not been living in reality? Whether they're our children, coworkers, friends, family members, but have been living in a cloud of fantasy or a cloud of protection or whatever it happens to be. Or finally somebody just says, damn it, this is who I am. I'm coming out of whatever closet I've hidden myself in, and this is who I am. Well, what I've discovered with all of that is the people that love you have always known who you are, and either they really like it or they really don't. But the people who love us really have, I believe, somewhere in there, they know who we are. And it's either either benefited them that you didn't become who you are, right? Or it's a wonderful thing that you're finally becoming. But the beautiful part about becoming is there will be those people who will love you no matter what. There are those people who are not going to like you no matter what. And the other 60% of the people that know you really don't care. The most important part is, how do you feel about yourself, faking it until you make it, or finally just saying to yourself, I think Cindy's alluding to this in the chat room. This is who I am, and I've become real, like the Velveteen Rabbit. And having the thought and the ability to say, I realize that getting real means that who's been showing up as what I thought was reality may not be there anymore.
Well, one of the things that I find, and I say this to Cindy directly, is that as an adopted child, you've always been real. And the work that you've had to do to uncover that reality has been filled with anguish. But I also know in myself, I'm not adopted. I'm from a family that I experienced love and trauma and all sorts of stuff. But the struggle to how do I identify myself outside my family? It's a very different point of view about the same drama.
Uh-huh.
How do I identify myself outside my family? And my family's a clan. So to be able to identify myself outside of it is hard work. And to be adopted, to identify yourself in it or out of it is still hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But it does boil down to one thing. Do we love ourselves enough to be an individual in the clan or outside of it? And that brings emotion up to me because, for me, interestingly enough, I'm excluded from my clan. And right now, Dana, you are so included in your clan.
Yes. Yes, I am.
And it's just an amazing reality in the moment of what has happened is I had so much clan and now I'm excluded, and you had so little and now you're included.
Mm-hmm.
But we both have become individuals because of it.
Yes. Beautifully said, Sand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as Cindy, your uniqueness is not what happened to you. It's what you've done with it.
Yeah. That's beautifully said for Cindy. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what's really funny, Sandy? Yesterday, Corey and I were laughing because when I did the Ancestry.com, and I hope I don't offend too many people with this, Todd and I were chuckling because I always wondered what my bloodline was. And I said, oh, just don't let me be Dutch. Just, for God's sakes, just don't let me show up as Dutch. And anybody who lives here in West Michigan, you know what I'm talking about. So this is kind of exclusive to this area. And by golly, when you say those things, Corey and I were chuckling because our grandparents, our parents, crawled out of the rocks of the earth in the Netherlands. I mean, that's where they came out of. And so the reality now for me is that my mother's people are 1,000,000% Dutch.
Right. And
reframing that. And Corey and I have had wonderful chuckles and thoughts about that. And
it gets you real.
And it keeps me real. And so tomorrow, she and I are going to Holland, Michigan. We're going to go to the wooden shoe factory together.
Oh, for God's sakes.
We're going to look at doilies and macrame.
Oh,
right?
My God.
And Coogan and whatever else Dutch people
Coogan!
Make. There we go.
Oh, my God. Bring a cigar home for your husband. Jesus.
But it's funny how reality can shift and change in a moment, and we can either hide from that. I could have said, oh my God, Corey, just don't ever tell anybody. Or, hey, Corey, let's go to the wooden shoe factory. They make wooden shoes right here. Let's go try some on. Right?
Hysterical. and there's the beauty of also knowing that our that yearning doesn't happen until it's triggered.
Right.
So, Corey, I want to ask you one more question. When did that void get triggered in you to know that it was a reality? What age do you think you were where it started tapping on your window pane?
I think it started when my mother passed away.
Ah, of course. And how long ago was that?
Oh gosh, she's been gone since 1997.
Isn't it interesting that
it's been for quite a while?
Yeah, when a touchstone leaves, the touchstone of your soul starts to be really loud.
Yeah.
That's and even I will say this in the grace of your mother's passing, that for her to be on the other side and be able to have the larger view of all that is, she could honestly say, look farther, love. Look farther.
Yeah. We were saying yesterday, we went to visit Elise in the hospital, and on the way home, Corey and I were talking about that we were certain that her mother and my mother and our grandparents were on the other side, enjoying the fact that after 56 years, this has finally come about. And I believe that to be true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the veil is so thin, and I want to be very, very specific, and that's part of the reality, is that I had a phone call from somebody the other day in Scotland, and I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning having a conversation with this person. It's like, well, I'm awake. And so I started talking to this person in the dark with the silver mist outside, and, just talking to them from soul to soul. And all of a sudden my phone goes, bing! And it's like, oh, and it's that person. And we text. Before you know it, we're talking live. And that wormhole of reality is, all of a sudden they go, what are you doing up? Well, I'm talking to you. We might as well get on the phone. And that the conduits of connection for the reality of what is beyond, that we assume is either metaphysical or mystical or maybe a manifestation of our own fantasy world, is so viscerally present that we're touching it in real time. And I'm going to ask everybody to start kind of tracking it with the fact that the other side wants us to pay attention, begging us, tapping on our window panes, knocking on, like, this is bigger than you think it is, everybody.
Yes.
Wake up.
Yes.
Wake up.
Yes. The ancestors are speaking loudly. Pay attention.
Yeah. So it's a good time to come out of that thing. Did I make that up? Am I fantasizing? Was that real? Well, I can't trust myself. Well, my intuition is like, you know what? Instead of having that chatter, kind of pursue it and trust that you're not crazy, and trust the other side is not playing around with you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't want you to be out of the loop of the love that it's offering. And I think for Corey that, it's just astounding to know that you have allowed the loop of love to get real rather than to stay outside of you. Mm-hmm. That's brave. Mm-hmm. That is bravo.
Mm-hmm. Well, today my car broke down. I literally spent the entire day until 8 o'clock tonight with a tow truck driver, waiting for the tow truck driver, waiting at the dealership, waiting at the bookstore next to the dealership. That's what I've done literally for 10 hours today. And on the way to the dealership, the sweet tow truck driver, his wife recently spent 7 weeks in the hospital. Identical situation to Elise. They now have a 5-month-old child. And, oh, by the way, he said, I'm adopted. And I said, well, Chris, you don't say. And he said, well, yeah, my family contacted me, but I don't want anything to do with them. They're all a bunch of takers. And frankly, I just decided a while back, I don't want anything to do with those people. How's it been for you, Denise? And I said, well, quite different than that. It's been absolutely wonderful. And so this was the conversation that he and I had for the half hour that we were in his tow truck going from my hairdresser's place out to 28th Street in Grand Rapids to get, my Yukon looked at. And so here I was having this mirror image shown to me. And rather than be frustrated by the fact that I was in this tow truck, it was hot, the windows were open, I thought to myself, there's a reason that I'm in this front seat with this young man having this experience. And the conversation began. He was quite chatty. And I looked at him and I said, well, maybe the Yukon just won't start because you and I needed to have a conversation today. And he looked at me and he said, Denise, I believe in that stuff. I totally believe in that stuff. And so you tell your daughter everything is going to be perfectly fine, A-okay, and my 5-month-old daughter has caught up, and in fact, the doctor now says she's going to be taller than me.
Oh my God.
Now tell your daughter that. And so when we got to the dealership, he showed me a photo of his baby named Oakley, and I made sure to tell his supervisor what an absolutely amazing human being he is. But I thought to myself, being real and being present in the moment, being conscious of the fact that I'm in the front seat with this young person, meant that something was happening.
Angels on board.
Angels on board. And that's also keeping it real. And it's exactly what you just said about the ancestors wanting us to be present in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are so many visitations. There are so many different ways that spirit is communicating. That keeping it real means that we have a heron. I mean, there is this beautiful bird that has been making these passes right through the sun, right through the moon. It literally landed on the pool fence the other day. And when I read all the things about the heron today, it is Bobby's guidance.
Exquisite.
And exquisite. And for Bobby to be already caught, visited, seen, honored, awaited, and escorted with the beauty of this calm and staying in the moment and the present is giving him a sense of it doesn't matter how it happens, it's happening, and he's not going to be abandoned in any part of it. Mm-hmm. Wherever he's been, wherever he is, and wherever he's going, he's already there.
And that's the reality.
That is the reality. Mm-hmm. And I'm witnessing it in a way that this bird is here for me as strong and as present. And that beauty of the veil is honoring us to not fear our life, don't fear our courage, and don't fear the trust that we want to really have in the universe of not being real. It's real.
It's real.
It's really real. And being in the moment, being the present, means that we literally drop the fear of the moment not being real and including us. We're included.
Sandy, Lady Hawk is saying she has a photograph. Lady Hawk, Catherine Harrison down there in the great state of Texas, is an amazing, profound photographer, I would say.
Best sunsets ever.
And birds and wildlife, and she has a photograph of a heron for you.
I'll take it.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, Sandy, we're way past the top of the hour, love, so we need to sign off for the evening. I'm going to give you the last word because this has been a great topic.
Oh, my God. Well, first and foremost, I would like to say thank you to Corey for being there and being a part of us and for being right on time. How astounding. Right on time. And I want to thank you for being the capable human being you are, Dana, to find your reality and dismiss and purify what has been denied you as real. And to our listeners, I want to say, this is a brave time, so have the courage to stay in your courage and be gentle, be honest, and be respectful. And for myself, I'm about to kick ass, and here I am. So thank you, everybody, for loving me and supporting me and giving love to Bobby and to Elise. And have a great month, and we'll see you next month.
Have a great evening, San.
Bye, Sandy.
Okay, you too. Bye.